Craziness all over the place. The political world, well, it's melting down when you start looking at the Ukraine and Russia affair. What's happening there? The markets are in turmoil, and I'm getting crushed. I've been chasing. We're going to tell you why that's a bad idea. Golf, yeah, we've come from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. Juwan Howard is open hand slapping people. And who knows what else we're going to get into. It's breaking even. Welcome into Breaking Even. Ned Michaels alongside Guy Adami and the coach, Jonathan Coachman. Gentlemen, welcome. We are recording this show Tuesday morning. And Guy, we normally start with golf and sports and gambling and coach. But with the Russia-Ukraine situation and the markets, at some point, the futures were down over 500 points. Yeah. We're going to start with the markets today. Give me your overall macro sense of how this Russia-Ukraine is going to play out and then how it's going to affect the markets.
Great to be with you, Ned. Always great to see the coach. We've talked about this, Ned. I know you know this, but we've been talking about this since the fall of last year. We thought the Russia-Ukraine situation would sort of rear its ugly head after the Olympics. And quite frankly, that's one that we got right. We typically don't get a lot right. The other thing that nobody's really talking about yet is, you know, what's going to happen with China and Taiwan. I think that's going to manifest itself too over the next few weeks. What does it mean for the market? Well, clearly markets were not that pleased last night when the news broke. Futures, as you mentioned, Dow futures were down over 500 points. They are actually unchanged to slightly higher at one point today, now lower again, and this roller coaster will continue. I think what the market is saying, Ned and Coach, maybe with this unrest, Russia-Ukraine, maybe it puts the Federal Reserve on hold in terms of them raising rates. I think that's what the market is looking for in terms of a silver lining. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, wasn't it something like last week it was a 90% chance they were going to go up 50 basis points, and then this morning it was a 14% chance that in March they were going to go up 50 basis points. So
that's exactly right.
I have learned a lesson that I already knew, that you both have taught me. Don't chase. I think actually we ended last week's show with talking about don't make the chase bet. I thought I was so well positioned. I had my energy plays in. I had sold some Tesla. I'd sold a little NVIDIA. I had puts on. And then I just started getting smoked. And buy some of that. Buy some of that. Buy. So, I mean, just a complete squirrel in traffic kind of look on my face.
Which is not a good look.
No, it's terrible. It's
a horrible look. It's a horrible
How do I circle the wagons? What do I need to do to just calm things down a little bit and get prepared for what we might see in this volatile environment over the next couple of weeks or months?
Coach, he just said it. Ned, you just said it. How do I calm things down? That's exactly what you need to do. You need to take, and I know this is hard, and I'm not trying to be glib here, and I know it's very difficult because as human beings, we are by definition emotional creatures. But you have to try to take emotion out of the equation. You have a plan, stick to the plan. And they're going to be, listen, they're going to be headlines that scare the you-know-what out of you. They're going to be events that scare the you-know-what out of you. But with that said, if you have a plan in place, you've effectively taken the emotion out of the equation. The same way you do it in sports gambling is the same way you do it in terms of the markets. Have a plan and stick to it. Because quite frankly, Ned, the plan you just talked about, selling Tesla, selling NVIDIA, being long energy names, that plan is working.
Then why was I telling myself this morning?
Can I jump in real quick, Ned?
I'm such an idiot. You're so stupid. I went back to like I was playing professional golf again. You're just a moron. 5-iron, huh? You idiot.
Is this? Can I ask you a quick question, guys? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Can I do that? So you just mentioned the reason we do the show this way is because there's so many similarities between sports betting and the market. Is that the hardest thing for people to do in the marketplace? Because I know in sports betting, to take the emotion out of it and stick with your game plan, it is the hardest thing for me to do and all the people that watch our show to do.
What makes it so hard, Coach, and that's a great point, is, as I mentioned earlier, we are emotional creatures. And when things are going great, we ride that sine curve, right? When things are going great, we're way up here. And then when things are going poorly, we're troughing, and that sine curve continues. And I will tell you, as a human being, that's probably not necessarily a bad thing. Great things happen in your life. You get happy about it. Obviously, we all go through some difficult times. We get down about it. And that's the normal sine curve of a human life. As traders, as gamblers, you have to try to flatten that sine curve out, which makes us, I would submit, really difficult human beings to be around, but I think very good at our craft. And in your world, Coach, and in my world, the people that are the most successful are in times of great urgency and great conflict. That's when time slows down. It works on a gridiron, works on a golf course, works in gambling, and it works in trading.
I think part of the issue is as I'm learning, I still don't know quite enough to know and understand levels yet, right? So when you look at something, you see levels and okay, I'm in this band and that's okay. And then a break of structure, you can identify. I don't have that ability yet. So if I have a game plan and I'm playing in a golf tournament and I get off the game plan, I know I can adjust. In this scenario, I still don't know how to make the adjustments. So I just panic and either sell or buy. I mean, that's the hardest part is, I got a plan, but I don't know when the plan isn't working and it's time to pull the ripcord.
That's really, listen, Ned, I understand that totally. And I'm 58 years old, so I've been in the business for 36 years, and it's never easy. And I'm not suggesting that it is, but over time, like anything else in life, you start to see patterns develop. And a lot of it is pattern recognition and be able to look at a chart and say, I see this pattern. I see these support levels. I see these resistance levels. So it just takes time. But I will tell you, it's so much easier if you take that word panic, emotion out of the equation. Just stick to the principles and the premises that you had ahead of time.
How do you think this Ukraine-Russia situation plays out? Now, Putin has recognized, for lack of a better term, these two states, these two regions within the Ukraine, and he has claimed them as Russian territory. By all accounts in the media, he has ordered troops into those two territories. Do you think he stops there, or do you think he just keeps on rolling?
Personally, I think he keeps rolling. I'm sure Coach has some views on this, but I'll tell you why that is. And again, I'm not some great history buff, but I will tell you that I think Vladimir Putin longs for the rebirth of the Soviet Union. Quite frankly, forget about the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire. And I think he's trying in some ways to bring that back. He doesn't care about sanctions. He doesn't care about what people will say over the next 5 weeks. He's thinking about what will history books say about me in the next 500 years? And will I be looked at as Alexander the Great, somebody that's strong, maybe failed in my attempt to bring back the greatness of the Soviet Union, but at least I tried. So I think we're looking, as Americans, we're looking at this the wrong way. We say to ourselves, how can he do this? He's going to hurt his economy. He's going to hurt his people. I don't think he cares about that. So to answer your question, I think this is the first step. And I think what he's hoping for is the Ukrainians fight back, or there's some tension on those now reestablished borders, and then he has reason to go into the Ukraine. So I think this has been a plan that's been thought out for years. I think he's putting it into place now. To think he's going to back off in any way, I think it's a fool's errand.
Well, when you start talking about the pipelines that are Germany kiboshing and putting these sanctions on Russia and him not caring about his economy, it seems like it's right in our face. Let's talk specifically about a few stocks and a few industries. I obviously want to start with oil. This is something that you have, you've nailed it in terms of OIH. But you did mention, I think it was on the tape from last week, how you would see a pop and then you would see a pullback.
Yeah.
So where do you think, is it a pop and a pullback and then a moonshot, or is it keep going down after the pullback?
No, that's a great question. So I have mentioned that on the tape, and I remember 1991 and the knee-jerk reaction when that war first began. I want to say it was a Sunday night. It might have been a Monday night, but it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock Eastern time. It was something like lights seen over Baghdad or something like that, and that was the beginning of that war. And I remember crude spiked north of $20 a barrel, and 6 to 8 hours later, it was actually trading lower than when it started. And I remember that, and I'm saying to myself, this is going to play out similarly. And I think that's what's going to happen. You have this knee-jerk reaction higher. I think cooler heads will prevail in the commodities market, because I think a lot of the people that have been long the commodity were long for this event. You'll see a profit taking, but I think subsequently you'll see that knee-jerk back up to 120. And I'm not trying to overtrade this, but I think the knee-jerk reaction higher. I think you have a couple weeks of consolidation to slightly lower. And then I think by, April, May, we're going to be talking about crude oil. It's $110 to $120 a barrel.
Wow. So where would that, by the way, similarly should be part of the field sobriety
Very
test?
difficult word for me
Can
to
you
say.
imagine
Similarly.
if they
have
had
a little peanut butter
Can
with
you
that.
spell that, please?
Regularly, thousandth, similarly. I mean, all
Right.
very difficult words for somebody of my intellect to say.
Sir, I'm just going to get in the back of your car over there. You can take me to the paddy wagon. So what does that do for the levels of OIH then? Right now it's 240. To your point, it did pop up to 246. It went back down. It's now back up a little bit. So at 240, if oil does get to that 110, 120, I mean, we looking at a 300 kind of range on OIH?
I think that's exactly right. And I've said that 240 level. I know you know this. We've talked about it on your show. 240 being that sort of upper end of the band resistance level. In other words, where it should slow down. And that's exactly what's happening here at the 240 level. So I think if you're trying to be a disciplined trader, if you've been long this OIH since that 175, 180 level that we first started talking about it, it's probably prudent to take some money off the table. I will tell you, although I do think it could pull back a bit, I think we're headed to 285, 300. I think people underestimate what's going on here in the world. And by the way, this is not just a Russia-Ukraine story in terms of the oil market. This was set long before that in terms of supply-demand fundamentals, and those fundamentals are still in place. So you've effectively just added one more element to this bull market thesis that I think it's going to continue to play out into the summer.
If you're just joining us on Breaking Even, we normally will start with our sports and then gambling segment, but given everything that's going on in the markets in Russia and Ukraine, we flipped the script today. We are starting with the markets with Guy Adami. We're going to get to some golf picks and review our last week's, look ahead to this week, the Honda Classic. We're also going to get into Juwan Howard. And Coach, you can weigh in on this, and Guy as well. Not even a close fist, an open-handed slap that cost him the rest of the season. And then also the All-Star game, we're going to have some reactions. I do want to, there was Guy a couple of weeks ago, I think it was a market call. You and Dan Nathan were talking with Carter Braxton Worth in a chart. Phillip Morris came up. And at the time it was 100, 102. And all of you agreed this is a good looking chart, maybe going to 120. I'm curious because I saw a graphic that said Phillip Morris has the most exposure to this Russia-Ukraine situation. And so I'm wondering, does that hurt it? Or is it a temporary pullback? Talk to me about, there we go.
Yeah. And look, you're looking at the S&P exposure to Russia, Ukraine top companies, and this is it, Phillip Morris. Now, they have the top exposure, and you'll say to yourself, wow, that's a big deal. But in retrospect, it's not huge exposure, right? I mean, Russia, by the way, has the same economy. It's the economy the size of Australia. And I'm not trying to make light of this, but you just got, in context, Russia's not nearly as big as economy as you would think. So although Phillip Morris has the most exposure there in terms of companies, it's not all that big in terms of the size of the company that they are. With that said, that 120 level sort of played out. I think we got up to about 116, 117 recently on the back of earnings. That's the high we saw, I want to say May or June of 2017. So it's setting up for a bit of a double top. And this news, this chart that you're putting up might give people a reason to take profits. But I think if you were to see PM back down to about that 102, 105 level where we first started talking about it, you buy it again.
All right, so I was in at 102. It went to 114 or whatever. It's 110. Do I just hang in there, or do I maybe take a little profit and then see what happens?
Well, I think you see how it trades today, and I'm not trying to shirk your question, but today's going to be a great tell. If it trades okay today, given that chart you just put up, maybe that's your tell and say, you know what, PM, the stock is looking past this. If it sort of gives it up a little bit, then you have to reevaluate. I'd like the company. I think in terms of valuation, it makes a lot of sense in this environment. I'm inclined to stay with it here, Ned.
What about this TLT you gave us last week? You were talking about as a protection against some of this volatility as well.
Well, one of the things I've said for a while, and I know you know this, that I thought 10-year yields would go to 2%. We got a bit north of 2%. But then I said, I think if you were to see a significant market sell-off, you will see a flight to quality in the form of bonds. In other words, people will buy bonds, yields will go lower. And to a certain extent, that's what we saw. We saw 10-year yields above 205. They traded down to 187 or so. I think right now we're around 193. So I think if this situation continues to heat up, as counterintuitive as it is, I think you'll see a flight to quality in the form of bond yields, which will mean that TLT will continue to go higher.
And again, I think it was on the tape. You and Danny were talking about some of these. It was Danny in particular was talking about some of these tech stocks. NVIDIA was the context of that conversation. But he was saying you have to just basically wipe out the gains that they had in the fall. And you have to go back and look at the levels where they were trading pre-fall. And that's where he was saying that we're going to find some support. So you go to a company like Amazon, who's bounced around all over the place. And even Tom Lee, his strategist, was talking about, his technical strategist was saying, if this goes under 2,700, you could see this easily down to 2,400 in a big company like Amazon.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Amazon because they reported earnings the day after Facebook reported their earnings. And if you remember, we can go back that day that Facebook just got obliterated. The ensuing day, everybody sold Amazon in fear that the same thing would happen. And you saw the exact opposite. But if you go back and look at the quarter that Amazon reported, it was good, but by no means good enough to see that 13-14% move we saw to the upside. Now, subsequently, the stock has given it all back. And I'm with Tom Lee on that one. In terms of NVIDIA, your tell was last week when they reported a significant quarter. They gave higher guidance for the first quarter, but the stock sold off. That's all you need to know. Good news, bad price action is a great tell in our business.
See, Coach, now I feel a little calmer. My plan that I was abandoning, at least mentally this morning, is still intact. Guy Adami has just...
See, I don't like it when you get excited, Ned. You're kind of the calm voice amongst all of us blowhards on your show. So I'm glad that you're back down to where you can handle yourself. Summarize a little bit of that. Long in oil. Watch out for NVIDIA. Keep an eye on Amazon. Watch what Phillip Morris does today. If it hangs in there, might be headed higher. If it takes a hit, just keep an eye on it. So we covered a lot of ground. I do want to just take a moment and send our thoughts and prayers to everybody in the Ukraine and Russia. And just for protection and peace. And let's figure out a diplomatic solution to this, because I know in the markets where you get so focused just on the money side of it, you forget that there are lives at stake. And for him to roll tanks, into neighboring country, I mean, this is a big issue that needs the coverage that it's getting, especially when you start talking China and Taiwan on the heels of it. And let me just say this, because I think I'm probably one of the rare people that have been back in 2004, 2005, 2006. We would go to Iraq, we would go to Afghanistan and do shows there when I was in the WWE. And we don't think about people living in these areas, in these types of countries. This is real. This stuff is real. And I can't even imagine leaving my house every single day and having to worry about tanks coming down my street and thinking, and that's real, because I've seen it with my own two eyes in these types of countries. So certainly what you just said, we need to think about these people because they're real.
It is breaking even. That is Guy Adami and the coach. I'm gonna throw Jacob, our producer, a real curveball here, because I know that, Guy, you've got a hard out here before too long. And we were going to kind of wrap a little bit with Juwan Howard at the end of the show, but I know you're a big basketball fan. Yeah. I want to get both of your thoughts on what happened between Michigan and Wisconsin. There were tempers that flared after a late timeout was called. The game was well in hand. Wisconsin coach calls a timeout. Juwan Howard took exception to it, and they had words. And next thing you know, at the end of the game, instead of shaking hands, they're slapping one another in the face. At least Juwan Howard was. What's your take?
It's hard for me to get inside the head of Coach Howard, for sure. I'll tell you, I think a lot of it is frustration on how the season's going. I mean, this was a top 10 team in the preseason, and they've gone on to lose. I think that was their 6th or 7th loss of the year. They might be on the outside looking in terms of the NCAA tournament. And I think frustration is probably first and foremost. And quite frankly, I think he sort of spoke to that. He did apologize in retrospect. I think he realized what he did was probably over the line. What I'll tell you, though, when a coach calls a timeout when you're up big and late in the game, I mean, that's going to piss people off without question. I would say, store that away and kick their ass next year. In his mind, I'm frustrated. I'm upset. He then subsequently put his hands on me. And I think that just escalated things. I'll say this about Coach Howard. I do think he's done a really good job there, but it's really hard when you hired a university, one of your legends, to coach the team. We're finding that now with Georgetown and Patrick Ewing. St. John's saw the same thing with Chris Mullen. I mean, unless your name is Mike Krzyzewski or John Wooden, you get hired to get fired in these jobs. And it's more difficult when you have to do it to a person that meant so much to your program for so many years.
Coach, 5-game suspension for Juwan Howard. Do you think that is appropriate?
I thought it was completely appropriate. And I think one of the things we've lost in this whole story is that Wisconsin, their head coach, is the one that started this. He called the timeout. And whether – and I played college basketball, so I've been there on both sides of the fence on this. Juwan Howard was going to walk by and give him like the limp wrist, handshake and just keep it moving. He's the one that grabbed him by the arm and stopped him and then got into it. Now, where Juwan Howard was completely wrong, and this is not the first time that he has lost his cool in a situation, and that needs to be brought in too, is you can't open hand slap anybody, period. I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm sure it's happened on the floors of the stock exchange that if somebody slaps another one, he's not going to be on the floor of the stock exchange for a certain period of time. So I thought it was appropriate. The one thing that people need to understand that most of his salary is not part of this $400,000. So the fine is peanuts compared to what he makes from Nike and from his camps. And they do it for a reason that way. So he's not losing as much money as people think. The suspension is only for the regular season. So I thought it was appropriate. I thought the Wisconsin coach should have got at least a 1-game suspension if I would change anything of that.
Well, it was interesting because the Wisconsin coach was saying the reason he called timeout was to reset the clock.
Bogus.
So that he could then have more time to get his team down court in a full court press situation. There were only seconds left. They were up by, 15?
Exactly.
I wonder, though, if Juwan Howard, if it's a closed fist punch, is he gone?
He's fired.
Is he fired?
100%. Gone. You cannot throw a punch on TV, on the sideline of a Big Ten game as the leader of the program and keep your job. He's lucky it was a open hand slap. With that being said, I do think being in the business I'm in and that we're in, people have gotten a little bit soft, maybe a lot soft, but in this instance, you just cannot do it as a leader. And I'm big on leadership.
Guy, when was the last time you open hand slapped another man?
In 1980s, I'll tell you. I mean, I can remember like it was yesterday. It wasn't an open hand, by the way. It was a closed fist. It was in Washington, D.C., and it was epic. I've obviously grown up a lot since then, but suffice to say the world was much different 40 or so years ago.
Coach, you have a lot of experience with the open hand slap. That's a move in the wrestling world.
It is. The Rock famously loved to slap his leg as he was throwing a fist. But I will tell you this. We got challenged a lot when we would go overseas because people would only see us on TV and rarely saw us in person. So I was in more than one brawl that I had to be in because we get off the bus and people would try to test us. And they think, oh, it's the fake wrestlers coming into town. They're not tough. Trust and believe. The WWE wrestlers are very, very tough, and we would show that when we had to.
Guy Adami, you've got a hard out here in the next couple of minutes, so we're going to let you slide. Don't open hand slap anyone today.
Yeah,
I love you, fellas.
But call Danny. Call Danny and tell him I'm in his head.
You're totally in his head. There's a reason why Danny Moses is not here today, Coach, and that's because you have now taken up permanent residence in his head.
Let's go.
Guy, thanks a lot. He's been getting the better of Dan as well. Danny has been slapping him around. Hey, Coach,
Yep.
Breaking even. Again, we normally start with the sports and move into some betting and then into the markets, but everything that's been going on, we decided to go with the markets first today. Let's slide our way into some of the sports. I want to start with our selections last week at the Genesis in California at Riviera. Joaquin Niemann pulls it out in record-setting fashion. This is one of my favorite guys on the PGA Tour. I love his action. He's a really nice, humble young man, a former world #1 amateur. And he did some things that we talked about. I said, you got to hit it long. He's top 10 in driver length, and he can hit it high. It's not necessarily his forte, but our picks, our sleeper, who I really kind of liked, Luke List, Tony Finau, Sam Burns. Where are we going?
They were all three great picks, and I stand behind them, and they all just did not figure it out. By the way, I love doing the show live because then we get chat comments. Inciting a riot should not be tolerated, Chris Sinclair. Chris, I agree with you. That's exactly right, and I think that's why we were just talking about open. If it would have been a fist, he'd have been gone. But thank you for that first live thing on the show, Ned. This is awesome.
I forgot about that. You told me about it last week, and there you go. Right, inciting a riot should not be tolerated. And by the way,
absolutely right.
Hitting a man is one thing, but open hand slapping him, that's almost more insulting.
Disrespectful.
Right.
Yes,
that's like, you're not even worth hitting. I'm just going to slap you.
That's exactly
right in your ear hole. I mean, that was the
worst.
His hands are huge. It looked like he was just going to grab the guy's entire head and just.
Well, he's a power forward. I mean, he played 20 years in the NBA. So, but believe me, whenever I used to be in a wrestling match or whatever, getting boxed in the ear, that's the worst. It's worse than getting punched. So, but that whole situation, hopefully, it's behind us now. We can move on. Back to your question, Ned.
Yes.
About Joaquin Niemann and the fact he got the job done. I'll stand behind my picks because when you look at the leaderboard, I don't think anybody could have predicted many things that happened. I mean, at one point, Jordan Spieth was 10 under, and I thought he was sailing towards contending, and he ends up, 10 back, 11 back, something like 15 back. So this is such a difficult week to handicap, talking about Riviera. Over $2 million first place now. So Joaquin Niemann, and you heard Tiger Woods on the Saturday broadcast. He said because of how we made this golf course, it plays into the hands of somebody like Joaquin Niemann, who flights it low and hits it really, really fast because everything was firing. The fairways were firing. And so I would have loved if Tiger would have told us that before the tournament so we could have bet on Joaquin Niemann.
Right.
But he had great analysis, and it was good to see Tiger back, at least with a headset on and in person. That was cool.
It's funny because I talked to some of the players and caddies out there, and they told me they was as firm and as fast they'd ever seen the golf course. And I thought, that's fine. It doesn't matter because it's Riviera. It always gets misty. It always rains one day, and the golf course always goes back to what it is, which is slow and long, and you have to hit it high. It didn't go back. They didn't get the rain, and it did play firm and fast, and the greens were spectacular. And so to your point of not as important to hit it high anymore because the ball is bounding, and so you can drive it in lower with like Joaquin does. So those are the kind of things that you just have to anticipate, and sometimes you get it wrong.
Yeah,
got it wrong. Sorry,
it happens. We're
going to give you thought last week was tough. Wait until we go to the picks, and we're going to give you our picks here in a few minutes. The Honda Classic picks. I mean, you start looking at the winners over the past few years. I mean, just all over the place in terms of what ability, what element they excel in. This next week, this Honda Classic is going to be really tough to pick. But first, Coach, I do want to talk a little bit about the Saudi League, what's happening, the Greg Norman-backed Saudi Money League.
Yeah.
We have seen now more and more players take a hardline stance. By the way, I agree with this stance, but Dustin Johnson came out this week and said he's for the PGA Tour. It was Bryson DeChambeau also saying, not quite as emphatically as Dustin Johnson, but saying, if the best players in the world are on the PGA Tour, that's where I'm going to play. And then, of course, there was Rory McIlroy, who, well, he jumped on the back of Phil Mickelson, and then Billy Horschel, coach, doubled down.
So here's the deal, Ned. You know how, and it's kind of, I compare it to my time in the WWE. When you've got a group of 50 or 60, and on the PGA Tour, it's 150 to 200, that you're around each other every single week. You're around each other a lot. You're in a bubble, and you know people better than most. And I can't help but wonder what the next interactions are going to be like between Rory and Phil, between some of these players and Phil, because what really exploded this entire thing was the interview that Phil did with Alan Shipnick that was posted and went viral this past weekend. And then I believe it was it Fratelli or it's Hickok who did the interview on the podcast that basically said guys were getting wired millions and millions of dollars into their bank account. So there's a lot to unravel here, but I will lean into what Rory said, because I think that's what everybody is thinking. And because Phil's such a big voice and a big personality that nobody wanted to say that against him. Everything Rory said, I would stand behind. I'm not a political guy. I was in the WWE when they signed a deal to go to Saudi. They just did a show last Saturday in Saudi Arabia. I didn't particularly agree with it when I was there. It was what it was. Vince made that decision. But when you make a decision as a personal brand, like what Phil has chosen to do, it now begs the question, did all of those other guys, Ned, flip over the course of a day or two because of that interview? That's what I thought. Because now Bryson says, PGA Tour, DJ, PGA Tour. Clearly, you and I work for the PGA Tour. I love the PGA Tour, right? I think this thing is going to end as fast as it began. And you can't have a league, I don't care where it is, be financially sustainable if Phil Mickelson and Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter are your top 3 guys. Let's just be honest. That can never succeed. They needed stars. All of the stars either backed out this week or they spoke out against it saying, I'm not going to go there. So I think it's going to be a non-issue. I applaud the players who finally stood up and said something. Now, if you're one of those players, Ned, that got 10 or 15 or $20 million wired into your bank account, do you just send it back? Send it right back, right?
Well, listen, you send that money back with interest. You want to make sure
that.
Yeah. So
100%.
listen, I have talked about this from the very beginning when these were just rumors. And I have said, listen, this thing is going to implode on itself. Maybe it gets off the ground, but at some point, they're going to pull the money. At some point, whatever they were trying to get out of it, they're not going to get out of it. And they're going to pull it. And you're going to be left a man on your own island. I've been against it. And keep in mind, I played on the Asian Tour. I'm a winner on the Asian Tour. I still have status on the Asian Tour. So technically, I could go back and play the Asian Tour, which is now backed by the Saudi money.
Correct. And that's another part of this that nobody's talking about. So you're bringing up a very good point. Nobody's talking about the fact that they've invested in the Asian Tour. We're just talking about this Super League. But they're trying to do more than that. But sorry, continue.
Well, it was because they needed somewhere to get world ranking points, right? So that if they did establish this global tour, they would be able to get strength of field and thus the world ranking points and into the majors and et cetera. I do wonder, and this is complete speculation, but I do wonder, Phil Mickelson's comments were clearly pretty abrasive. And you have Rory McIlroy saying what he said. I think I'm paraphrasing, but Billy Horschel basically called the comments idiotic. This could cost Phil sponsors. I'm just putting it out there.
Ned, there is no question that this is going to cost him sponsors. And I think
the big ones. That's right.
Yes. Hey, how do you stand behind a guy who made these comments, who literally said, these are Phil's words, that we're going into business with people that we know are murderers? I don't know that I could ever have those words come out of my mouth and then move ahead with it. Again, I have no opinion. None whatsoever, because I would never even but to say that, Ned, was that shocking to you?
Yeah, it was. And the way that the language that he used, it was very eye-opening. And again, I think he's got some big sponsors who have been with him a long time, and I think he may find himself with a few less.
And I believe that based off of what Rory said, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. Did you feel that way? Where he said, I don't want to kick a man while he's down.
But I'm going to.
But I haven't seen a whole lot of kicking Phil while he's down other than social media. So there's clearly, I think, stuff being said amongst the players behind the scenes, and I think we're going to see some big stuff come out.
He is the coach. You can find him on Twitter at Coach Rules, at The Coach Rules. I'm Ned Michaels. I'm at Ned Michaels on Twitter. And there's a scroll down here. It says, hit that like button and go subscribe to the Risk Reversal Media on YouTube. That's where this show, Breaking Even, lives in terms of the Risk Reversal Media platform. Has OK Computer, On the Tape, Market Call. A lot of really, really good shows. If you're into the markets, helping us save some money, maybe make some money, just don't panic like I did. All right, let's wrap it up. Honda Classic. I think we're going to skip out. We were going to talk about the All-Star game as well. I guess we could talk about that, but let's hit the Honda Classic picks. Coach, sleeper, top 10 winner, and favorite bet.
Yeah. I called this last year, Ned, for PGA Tour Live, and I was shocked at some of the players who played well on a very, very difficult golf course. And I'm leaning into players that are really, really dedicated, because this is the hardest week, in my opinion, to handicap, because you're going from the West Coast to the East Coast. A lot of the top players are not playing, so you got a lot of players that are getting in. But I'm leaning into players that have been playing well, but also are bigger name players. So my top 10, Billy Horschel. He lives in Florida. It doesn't matter. When Billy Horschel tees it up, he is there to win. Give me a top 10 there. Mito Pereira. I think he has a lot of motivation because his fellow countryman, Joaquin Niemann, won last week. He was a top 15 last week at Riviera. So Mito, he's on the verge. He's on the verge of getting it done. And at plus 4,000, I think there's great value for him as a winner or a top 10 or a top 20. And then Sungjae Im. We know he loves to play. He loves to play here. He loves to play on difficult golf courses. He's a terrific iron player, so I like him to get the job done. The price is very low because the strength of field is not great, but I still like him at plus 1,200. And then my best bet, Cameron Young. He's from the area. His family is a golfing family. He lives in the West Palm Beach area. I played with him less than a year and a half ago. This kid is the truth. Any other week, he would have won his first PGA Tour event last week at Riviera. And because of Joaquin Niemann, he finished second. Still won over $1 million. But this is a kid that is here to stay. Ned, he doesn't even have social media. He is that laser focused. I've been begging him to get social media. He will not listen to me. But it doesn't matter on the course. And on the course, this week, top 20, that's my best bet.
I like this Cameron Young. He was on the team at Wake Forest with Will Zalatoris. His dad, he comes from good pedigree. His dad's the head professional up at Sleepy Hollow. And before last year's U.S. Open out at Torrey Pines, I was talking to the Titleist rep who knows all the guys, especially his players. And I said, give me one name that maybe people aren't paying enough attention to. And I didn't even get a period on the end of the sentence or a question mark. He said, Cameron Young. This guy is a proper hitter of the golf ball. And he said something along the lines of, he's the best ball striker that he had seen in Titleist equipment at that time since Adam Scott. So
wow.
He said, just stand and watch him. And he's the kind of guy like a Lee Westwood, where if you're on the range, watch him, you can feel impact in your feet from 10 feet away. So I like this pick.
His legs are like this big. Like, oh my gosh. I could not believe how far he hits the golf ball in person with my own two eyes.
So again, when you're trying to handicap this was such a tough one, because of the field you're talking about. Again, look at the past winners over the last 5 years. It's kind of a little bit of everything. You've got superstars, then you've got a Matt Jones and a Keith Mitchell getting his first win. So what I narrowed it down to, and again, I'm just trying to simplify when you're looking at your bets, when you're looking at head-to-head matchups, any type of prop action that you're taking, look for the player who is hitting the ball the best. Now, I know that sounds pretty counter to that's pretty simple. What are you talking? I'm talking about look at driver accuracy. Distance is not all that important here. Again, and look at proximity to the hole, especially in the last couple of tournaments in which players have participated. Because if you can hit the ball around this golf course, that's how you're going to win. Putting, always important, no doubt, but not nearly as important. Look at the odds on Sungjae to win. He's one of the heaviest favorites, and he's putting terribly. I mean, he's like outside the top 150 in a lot of these important putting categories. Billy Horschel, mark my words, top 10 in the world. He will be a top 10 player in the world before the year is done.
He's playing great. And a lot of people don't realize how great he is playing because a lot of that was done in the fall. It also was done overseas. And here's a dude who he played really good a couple of weeks ago. And I'm with you. I'm very bullish on Billy Horschel. He's a former FedEx champion. And we forget that he won the FedEx Cup several years ago. So he's a top flight player, but now I think he's starting to move into his prime.
And he's got a secret weapon.
What's that?
Fooch, his caddy who caddied for Justin Rose when he won the United States Open, when he won a gold medal in the Olympics. Fooch is a veteran, and he and Billy have a great, almost like father-son, but like your favorite uncle kind of relationship where you have fun with him, but you really respect him and you listen to him because you know he has done it before. And Billy, we were talking about squirrel in traffic early. Billy can get all over the place, right? And that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love watching him play golf. And Fooch just harnesses him in when he needs to. He doesn't let him hit the stupid shot. Let's just edge over here. He knows when he's not doing things well, and he keeps him away from that stuff. And in the big moments, the big moments, Coach, Fooch is a calming voice, just like Guy was for me in our plan with the markets. Yeah, you've got to have that calming voice on your shoulder.
You have to. And I also love the fact that, and I'm just now getting to this point in my career, I have enough credibility and I have enough stability that I can say what I feel because I know it's the right thing to do, and that I owe it to people that I lead. in my brand at Sportsline, at CBS. And I believe that Billy, the Rorys, he has the ability to stand up, and he's tough, and he understands. And that's what I love about him. He's also not too cool for school, meaning he'll show you how much he wants to win the Honda Classic when maybe JT, DJ, Jordan, they're not there, but it still matters to him. And I love athletes like that. If you show up, show me you want to be there. Compete. And I love that about Billy Horschel.
I'm looking at the bets that I made this morning on the stock market, and they're all losers. I'm such a loser.
Bro, it's such an emotional, and Guy said it, roller coaster. And I'm going through it right now, and I think you're going through it too, that in the world of sports betting, we're in a lull right now. NFL season was a hard 6 months. We were doing 13, 14, 15 live shows a week. I was in it. And then all of a sudden it stops. And you've got this lull. And then you've got March Madness that for a month, you've got all the best basketball in the world. Then you have a lull. And I think the markets are the same way. Am I right? And right now I think you're going through a lull. And when you go through a lull, sometimes you have a tendency to lose.
Well, it's like looking at a round of golf or a game of basketball halfway through the third quarter or whatever. That doesn't really matter. If you have a game plan, just like you and Guy are saying, stick to it. So maybe these things are going to turn out to be winners. But again, I'm just mentally berating myself. You idiot. How could you be so dumb? Last thing here to clean it up. All-Star game. Yep. Absolutely incredible. The over-under on this thing at Caesars was 324.5. The under came in by 1.5 points. How can you even handicap the over-under on the All-Star game?
Well, we brought the number down to 321. We put a little parlay, Team LeBron on the money line, and we had the over at 321. So we actually cashed that parlay on our show, The Early Edge. But to me, these All-Star games are becoming so ridiculous. The only one that is even competitive that you should be allowed to bet on is on the Major League All-Star game.
Yeah, baseball game's the only one. Yeah,
that's totally the only one. Football was a touch game. And then yesterday, I almost bet on Steph Curry. He was plus 2,400 to lead the game in scoring. And I looked at it, and I was like, let me take a flyer. And he did. He scored 50. It was the easiest cash ever. And I didn't do it because I didn't follow my game plan of going after a guy that loves to show out. What did I just say about Billy Horschel? Steph Curry's that guy, and I should have bet on him because I knew he wanted to show out alongside LeBron James, who ended up making the game-winning shot. So it was all good.
You know, Barney and I do that segment called I Am So Stupid. And right now I got a bunch of them. And it sounds like yours was the Steph Curry that you didn't.
Yes.
Hey, I love this live format. Chris Sinclair, thanks for getting involved. Robert O'Brien, spread the word. Help us get more people in the chat because that just helps us, I think, cultivate the conversation and take it in directions maybe we didn't anticipate, but we enjoy.
100%,
so
100%.
For Guy Adami, for the coach, I'm Ned Michaels. This is Breaking Even. We'll be back next week.